She was carrying a mattress down North Hawthorne Avenue at 5:32 in the evening. No dolly, no moving truck, no one helping. Just a beautiful woman gripping a queen-size mattress wrapped in a faded-fitted sheet, dragging it 4 feet at a time, stopping every half block to adjust her hold. Beside her, a girl no older than 7 walked without complaint, carrying a black trash bag in both hands. The bag was almost as large as she was. A black Escalade slowed 3 blocks behind them. The man sitting in the back seat did not tell his driver to stop because of the woman. He told him to stop because of the street sign. He knew that address. He had grown up there. William Carter Hayes had been on a phone call for 51 minutes. A mixed-use development project in downtown Chicago. 26 residential units. Retail space on the ground floor. The numbers were clean. The projections were conservative enough to reassure investors and ambitious enough to make them wealthy. He had built an empire understanding exactly where those two things met. His attorney was explaining permit timelines while the city drifted past tinted windows. The interior of the SUV smelled like leather and silence. A bottle of sparkling water sat untouched in the cup holder. A tablet rested on the seat beside him with 5 contracts waiting for signature. The air conditioning held the temperature at a perfect 70 degrees. For 24 years, William had built a life where nothing outside the glass reached him unless he allowed it to. He wasn't looking out the window. He was reviewing numbers. Then he wasn't. Something crossed his peripheral vision, the way an unexpected error appears inside a spreadsheet. Not dramatic, not urgent, just unusual enough to interrupt his concentration. A woman carrying a mattress, alone, bent beneath the weight of it. Beside her walked a little girl carrying a trash bag. William looked up. For seconds passed. The attorney kept talking. William wasn't listening anymore. The woman shifted the mattress, moved it forward another few feet, stopped, adjusted her grip, moved it again. The little girl adjusted the trash bag without being asked, without looking up, without complaining. William continued watching. He didn't feel pity. He didn't feel charity. What he felt was stranger than either. Recognition. The woman moved the mattress again. The child followed beside her. William's eyes drifted past them, past the traffic, past the parked cars, to the green street sign hanging ahead, North Hawthorne Avenue. He read it twice, then a third time, not because he didn't recognize it, because he did. A specific kind of stillness settled over him, the kind that comes before memory opens. He knew this street. He knew every cracked sidewalk, every aging porch, every chain-link fence. Or at least he had 21 years ago. He knew what stood at the end of the block. He knew the house number without seeing it. His attorney asked a question. William didn't answer. Stopped the car. The driver glanced into the rearview mirror. Sir, stopped the car. The SUV rolled to a halt. William ended the call without saying goodbye. He placed the tablet face down on the seat. Then he opened the door. Heat rushed inside, along with the sounds of the city. Traffic, construction equipment, music from a passing vehicle, voices from a nearby restaurant. The ordinary soundtrack of life. He stepped onto a sidewalk he hadn't stood on in more than 2 decades. The beautiful woman carrying the mattress kept moving. She never looked back. She hadn't seen the vehicle stop. She didn't know anyone was watching. She continued walking toward the end of the block, toward the house, toward the address William already knew she was heading for. He didn't follow her. Not yet. He simply stood there, watching. Sarah Elizabeth Parker had been carrying the mattress for 9 blocks. She had started on Madison Avenue at 4:48 that afternoon with the mattress balanced awkwardly across her back and her daughter walking beside her. By the 3rd block, her arms had stopped shaking, not because the weight had become easier, because her body had moved beyond protest. The mattress weighed nearly 68 pounds. Sarah weighed 134. She hadn't eaten since the previous morning. A granola bar and a cup of coffee. That had been it. The mattress wasn't heavy in the way furniture is heavy. It was heavy in the way the last thing you own is heavy. Because if she couldn't carry it, there was nothing after it. No second trip. No storage unit. No moving company. No friend arriving with a truck. This was everything. everything that remained of the life she had built for her daughter. She stopped at a corner, lowered the mattress, leaned against it, breathed. The fitted sheet wrapped around it had slipped loose. She tucked it back into place. The skin on her palms was raw. A bruise darkened her right hand from where the mattress had slammed into a doorway earlier that afternoon. Emily stood beside her. She didn't ask how much farther they had to go. She didn't ask where they would sleep. She didn't ask why they were carrying everything they owned in trash bags. She simply waited. She was 7 years old. She had moved 5 times in 4 years. She had learned what her mother's face looked like when she was calculating how much farther she could go. She had learned not to interrupt that calculation. She had learned to stay quiet, stay ready, and walk when walking resumed. That isn't how a 7-year-old should think. But hardship teaches lessons early, sometimes far too early. Sarah picked up the mattress again. A black Escalade had stopped somewhere behind her. She didn't turn around. She had stopped looking at stopped cars a long time ago. Looking created hope. Hope created expectations. And expectations hurt when they disappeared. She couldn't afford another disappointment. So she kept walking. 3 blocks remaining. Then 2. Then 1. She counted distance the way she counted everything now. In steps remaining. In strength remaining. In daylight remaining. At the end of the street stood 3816 North Hawthorne Avenue. William Carter Hayes stared at the house before Sarah reached it. He didn't need to read the number. He already knew it. It had been the first address he ever memorized. The first place he had called home. The first place where his mother had told him everything would be okay, even when she wasn't sure herself. The house still stood. That was the first thing he noticed. The porch sagged slightly. Paint peeled from the siding. Several windows were boarded over. The yard had surrendered itself to weeds. But it was standing. William hadn't seen it in 21 years. 9 years earlier, he had noticed it in a property database. Tax delinquent. Distress. Scheduled for auction. He had closed the file and never opened again. The truth was simpler. He couldn't bring himself to face the memories waiting inside. Sarah reached the front steps. She lowered the mattress onto the sidewalk. Emily set down her bag. Sarah reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a key. Not a house key, a padlock key. William stared. The padlock clicked open. The front door creaked inward. Sarah lifted the mattress one final time. Emily grabbed her bag. Together, they crossed the threshold. Neither knew who William Carter Hayes was. Neither knew whose house they had entered. Neither knew that the man standing 75 feet away had once slept in the upstairs bedroom, or that he had spent 21 years avoiding this street. The front door remained open. William stood motionless on the sidewalk, looking at the entrance of the house where his life had begun. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about contracts, or investors, or money. He was thinking about a beautiful woman carrying a mattress, a little girl carrying everything she owned, and a house that somehow belonged to all of them now. Welcome to Super Stories. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments below. William Carter Hayes stood on the sidewalk for nearly a minute after Sarah and Emily disappeared inside the house. The front door remained open. The evening breeze moved through the doorway, carried with it the smell of old wood, dust, and a house that had spent too many years empty. His driver waited beside the Escalade. "Sir." William didn't answer. His eyes never left the house. 21 years. That was how long it had been since he had stepped inside. 21 years since his mother's funeral. 21 years since he had locked the front door for the last time and promised himself he would never come back. The promise had been easy to keep. Success made avoiding things surprisingly convenient. You could buy homes in better neighborhoods, drive different streets, surround yourself with people who never asked uncomfortable questions. You could become so busy building the future that nobody noticed how carefully you avoided the past, including yourself. The driver spoke again. "Would you like me to wait here?" William finally looked away from the house. "Yes." Then he started walking. Every step felt strangely familiar. The cracked sidewalk, the leaning mailbox 2 houses down, the old oak tree on the corner. Most of it had changed. Enough of it hadn't. He stopped at the bottom of the front steps. For a moment, he simply stared at the doorway. His mother's voice lived somewhere inside his memory. Not clearly, not as words, as a feeling. The feeling of being safe. The feeling of coming home. He hadn't felt either in a very long time. Inside the house, something scraped across the floor. The mattress. Sarah was moving it. William took a breath. Then another. Finally, he climbed the steps. The porch groaned beneath his weight. The sound was exactly the same as he remembered. That surprised him. Memory usually exaggerated things. This time it hadn't. He reached the doorway, knocked once against the frame. Immediately the noise inside stopped. Silence. A few seconds later Sarah appeared. She froze. William could see caution enter her eyes instantly. Not fear. Experience. The kind of caution that comes from learning that strangers rarely bring good news. Emily appeared behind her mother, half hidden, watching him carefully. William suddenly realized how strange this looked. A wealthy man in an expensive suit standing at the door of an abandoned house. He almost laughed. If someone else had told him this story yesterday, he wouldn't have believed it. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked. Her voice was polite, but guarded. William nodded toward the house. "I grew up here." Sarah blinked. For a second, she seemed unsure whether she had heard him correctly. "You what?" "I grew up in this house." Silence followed. Emily looked from her mother to William and back again. Sarah glanced over her shoulder, as if seeing the house differently for the first time. Then she looked back at him. "I'm sorry," she said carefully. "If there's some kind of problem with the property, I bought it legally." "I know." "You know." William nodded. "I checked." Sarah frowned. "You checked." He realized how strange that sounded. "I mean years ago. The property records." Sarah studied him, trying to decide whether he was crazy, or dangerous, or simply telling the truth. William couldn't blame her. He wasn't sure what he was doing here either. Finally, she stepped slightly aside. Not an invitation. Not exactly. Just enough space for the conversation to continue. William looked inside. The house was almost empty. The mattress sat in the middle of the living room. 2 trash bags rested beside it. That was all. No furniture. No television. No boxes. Nothing. Just a mattress and 2 bags. For a man who spent his days discussing multi-million-dollar properties, the sight hit harder than he expected. Because empty houses tell stories. And this one was telling him exactly how little Sarah and Emily had left. "You just moved in?" he asked. Sarah gave a small laugh. "Not the kind people make when something is funny. The kind people make when the alternative is crying. About 10 minutes ago." William nodded. The answer explained everything. The mattress, the bags, the exhaustion on her face, the child, everything. Emily stepped forward. 7 years old, small for her age, bright eyes, hair pulled into a ponytail. She looked directly at William. Children sometimes do that. They ignore the social rules adults create. They simply look and see. "Did you really live here?" she asked. William smiled slightly. "Yes." "Which room was yours?" The question caught him off guard. He pointed toward the staircase. "First room on the left." Emily looked upstairs, as if she could already imagine it. Sarah quickly touched her shoulder. Emily fell silent. William noticed something then. The little girl wasn't shy. She was careful. There was a difference. Careful children learn that behavior somewhere, usually from difficult circumstances. Sarah crossed her arms, not defensively, more from exhaustion. "You said you grew up here." William nodded. "My mother bought the house when I was 4. Sarah looked around the room. "Then you must have a lot of memories here." "I do." He didn't mention that most of them hurt. Some things didn't need saying. A floorboard creaked upstairs. The house settled. The same way old houses always do. William looked around. The wallpaper was gone. The paint had faded. Time had taken its share. But underneath it all, he could still recognize the place. Then his eyes returned to the mattress and the 2 trash bags. "Is that everything?" he asked quietly. Sarah followed his gaze. For a moment she didn't answer. Then she nodded. "Pretty much." The words landed heavily. Pretty much. Not everything, but close enough. William looked at Emily. The little girl was pretending not to listen, but she heard every word. Children always do. For the first time that evening, William felt something that resembled guilt, not because of Sarah, not because of Emily, because 21 years ago he had left this neighborhood promising himself that if he ever escaped poverty, he would never think about it again. And for 21 years he had succeeded, until today, until a beautiful woman carrying a mattress forced him to stop the car. And now he was standing inside the house he once called home, looking at a little girl who reminded him far too much of himself. The realization made him uncomfortable, because he suddenly understood something. He hadn't stopped the car because he recognized the street. He had stopped because he recognized the struggle. And for the first time in a very long time, William Carter Hayes didn't know what to do next. William stood in the doorway longer than he intended. The house was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that comes from emptiness. An empty house sounds different from a lived-in one. There is no television humming in another room, no dishes settling in the sink, no footsteps overhead, no evidence that life has had time to spread itself across the space. Just silence. The mattress lay in the center of the living room. 2 trash bags sat beside it. Everything Sarah and Emily owned fit inside a room that once held an entire family's life. William couldn't stop looking at it. Sarah noticed. People in difficult situations become skilled at noticing where others look, especially when those looks carry judgment. But there was no judgment in William's eyes, only confusion, and something else she couldn't quite identify. "You don't have to worry," Sarah said. William looked up. "What?" "The house." She folded her arms. "I bought it legally. I know. The city auction. I know. You keep looking around like you're expecting someone to tell me I can't stay." William shook his head. "No." Sarah studied him for a moment, then looked away. The truth was she had spent the last 5 weeks expecting exactly that. Another letter. Another notice. Another reason she would have to start over. When instability becomes normal, certainty starts feeling suspicious. Emily wandered toward a dusty window. She used one finger to draw a small circle in the dust covering the glass. Outside, the sun was beginning to lower. Orange light stretched across the street. For the first time all day, they were no longer moving. The realization seemed to reach Sarah all at once. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, only slightly. The body doesn't immediately trust safety after a long period without it. William noticed. He had seen the same thing in his mother years ago. The way exhausted people remain prepared for bad news, even during moments of calm. "How long was the house empty?" Sarah asked. William looked around. "At least 7 years." Sarah nodded slowly. That explained the smell. The dust. The peeling paint. The silence. Emily turned from the window. "Mom says we're going to fix it." Sarah smiled. The first genuine smile William had seen from her. It changed her face completely. For a brief second, he saw the woman she might have been before life became a series of emergencies. "That's the plan," Sarah said. Emily nodded confidently. "We're going to paint everything." William found himself smiling. "Everything. Everything." "What color?" Emily thought carefully. "Not gray." The answer surprised the laugh out of him. A real laugh. The first one in days. "Not gray," he agreed. Emily seemed satisfied. Then she pointed toward the staircase. "Is your room still up there?" William followed her finger. The staircase. The second floor. The hallway. The first door on the left. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Forgot about Sarah. Forgot about the years. Forgot about everything except memory. His mother standing at the bottom of the stairs, calling him for dinner. The sound of rain hitting the roof. A baseball glove abandoned in the hallway. A report card hanging on the refrigerator. A life, an entire life, stored inside a place he had refused to visit. Until now. "Yeah," he said quietly. "It is." Emily smiled. "You should go see it." Sarah immediately looked embarrassed. "Emily." "What?" "We don't tell people what to do. I'm just saying." William looked at the little girl, then at the stairs, then back at Sarah. To his surprise, Sarah shrugged. "I don't mind." The answer caught him off guard. You don't. Sarah glanced around the room. It's your house, too. William looked down. No. Sarah frowned. What do you mean? It used to be. He paused. But it stopped being mine a long time ago. The words sounded strange the moment he said them, because standing here, they didn't feel entirely true. The house no longer belonged to him legally. That much was certain. But memory has a way of ignoring paperwork. A place can stop being yours on paper and still belong to part of your heart. Emily tugged gently on Sarah's sleeve. Can we stay here? Sarah looked down. We are staying here. No, I mean forever. The room became quiet. Children ask questions adults spend years avoiding. Sarah knelt beside her daughter. I don't know about forever. Emily's smile faded slightly. Why not? Sarah brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. Because nobody knows forever. Emily considered that, then nodded, apparently satisfied. William watched the exchange. Something about it hurt. Not because of what Sarah said, because of how carefully she said it, as though she had learned not to make promises she couldn't guarantee. That lesson usually comes at a cost. A large one. Outside, a car passed slowly down the street. The fading sunlight stretched through the dusty windows. The house felt warmer now. Not physically. Emotionally. For the first time in years, someone was living here again. Someone was laughing here again. Someone was making plans for tomorrow, even if tomorrow wasn't guaranteed. William looked around the room one more time. Then his eyes landed on the mattress. No bed frame. No blankets. No furniture. Just a mattress on a floor. The reality of it settled heavily in his chest. Tonight, Sarah and Emily would sleep here, on that mattress, in an empty house, and somehow neither of them seemed to consider that unusual. That realization bothered him more than anything else, because hardship becomes truly dangerous when people stop being surprised by it. William checked his watch, then looked back at Sarah. You have food? The question came out before he thought about it. Sarah hesitated, only for a second, but he noticed. People who have enough food don't pause before answering that question. We'll figure something out. William nodded slowly. He recognized the answer. His mother used to say the same thing. We'll figure something out. Sometimes it meant yes. Sometimes it meant no. And sometimes it meant she didn't want him to worry. William glanced toward Emily. The little girl was drawing shapes in the dust on the window again, completely unaware that one simple question had just revealed more than Sarah intended. For the second time that day, William Carter Hayes found himself standing in a house he thought he had left behind forever. And for the second time that day, he realized he wasn't ready to walk away. Emily was the first to break the silence. Did your mom live here too? The question hung in the room. William looked toward the staircase. For a moment, he wasn't seeing the house as it was now. He was seeing it as it had been 21 years earlier. Fresh paint on the walls. Family photographs hanging in the hallway. The smell of dinner drifting from the kitchen. The sound of his mother humming while she washed dishes. Back then, the house had felt larger, warmer, alive. Yes, William finally said. She lived here for most of her life. Emily nodded thoughtfully. What was she like? Sarah immediately looked embarrassed. Emily, honey. What? I'm just asking. William smiled. It's okay. He glanced around the room, then back at Emily. My mother was the strongest person I've ever known. Emily's eyes widened. Stronger than superheroes? A laugh escaped before William could stop it. Much stronger. Emily seemed impressed by that answer. Sarah watched quietly. For the first time since William arrived, she noticed something she hadn't expected. The billionaire standing in front of her didn't speak, like most wealthy people she had met. There was no need to impress anyone. No arrogance. No constant reminders of success. When he talked about his mother, he sounded like a son, not a businessman, not an executive, just a son. What did she do? Emily asked. William leaned lightly against the wall. Whatever she had to do. Emily frowned. What does that mean? It means sometimes you work 2 jobs. He paused. Sometimes 3. Emily blinked. 3 jobs. William nodded. She cleaned offices at night. Like a janitor? Sometimes. Any other jobs? She worked at a grocery store. What else? He smiled. She delivered newspapers before sunrise. Emily's eyes grew wider with every answer. Did she sleep? The question made Sarah laugh softly. Even William laughed. Not very much. Emily looked genuinely concerned. That's not healthy. William nodded. No, it wasn't. Sarah couldn't help smiling. The conversation felt strange. Not uncomfortable, just unexpected. Less than 30 minutes ago, she had been dragging a mattress through the city. Now her daughter was interviewing a billionaire about his childhood. Life had a strange sense of timing. Emily pointed toward the staircase. Did you have lots of toys up there? William followed her gaze. The question brought another memory, one he hadn't thought about in years. No. Emily looked surprised. No toys. A few. Why only a few? William hesitated, then decided there was no reason to hide the truth. Because we couldn't afford many. The room became quiet. Emily looked confused. Sarah looked surprised. William noticed both reactions. People saw the suit, the watch, the vehicle outside, the success. They assumed those things had always existed. Very few people asked what came before. We didn't have much money when I was growing up, William continued. Emily looked at him as though he had just announced he had once lived on the moon. But you're rich. Sarah immediately looked uncomfortable. Emily, what? He is. William laughed. She's not wrong. Emily folded her arms. Then how were you poor? The simplicity of the question caught him off guard. Children expected life to make sense. Adults knew it rarely did. I wasn't always rich. Emily considered that. Oh, that seemed to satisfy her. For about 5 seconds. Then another question arrived. Did you ever have to move? The smile slowly faded from William's face. He glanced at Sarah, then at the mattress, then at the 2 trash bags. Finally he nodded. Yes. Emily waited. Children know when a story isn't finished. After my mom got sick, the room grew still. I was 17. Sarah looked up. William rarely spoke about his mother. In fact, he almost never spoke about his childhood at all. Yet here he was, talking about it with strangers. She couldn't work anymore, he said. The medical bills kept growing. Emily listened carefully. So you lost the house? William nodded. Eventually, the little girl looked around the room, at the walls, at the ceiling, at the floor, trying to imagine it, trying to picture William as a teenager standing exactly where she stood now. Sarah noticed something then. William wasn't telling the story dramatically. There was no self-pity, no performance, just facts, the kind people carry after enough years have passed. What happened after that? Emily asked. William looked out the dusty window. Cars rolled past outside. The neighborhood had changed, but not completely. I left. The answer was simple, because the truth was simple. I got a scholarship. Emily smiled. You're smart? William laughed. I was lucky. Sarah shook her head. People don't build companies worth hundreds of millions because they're lucky. The words slipped out before she could stop them. For a moment, their eyes met. William looked away first. Maybe not. The room fell quiet again. Not awkward, comfortable. The kind of silence that sometimes appears when people stop pretending. Outside, the evening sun was sinking lower. Golden light filtered through the dusty windows. For the first time in years, the old house felt occupied, not restored, not repaired, occupied, alive. Emily wandered toward the mattress and sat down. The exhaustion she had been carrying all day was finally catching up with her. She kicked off her shoes, then looked up at William. Do you think this house likes us? The question caught everyone off guard. Sarah laughed softly. William smiled. What makes you ask that? Emily shrugged. It feels different now. William looked around. The peeling paint, the worn floors, the empty walls. Then he looked at Sarah, and finally at Emily. For the first time in more than 20 years, there was laughter inside the house. Conversation. Life. Maybe the house felt different because it wasn't empty anymore. "I think it does," William said. Emily smiled, then yawned, a long yawn she couldn't hide. Sarah looked at her daughter and felt her heart tighten. The child was exhausted, hungry, and pretending she wasn't. William noticed it too. The mattress, the empty room, the absence of furniture, the absence of food, the absence of everything most people took for granted. And suddenly he realized something. Sarah and Emily hadn't come here because this house was their dream. They had come here because it was the only place they could afford. The realization settled heavily in his chest. Because 21 years ago, someone had once looked at his mother and him the same way, standing in a house with almost nothing, trying to start over. And for the first time that evening, William began to wonder whether fate had brought him back to North Hawthorne Avenue for a reason. William didn't speak for several seconds after Sarah finished. The room felt smaller now, not because of the walls, because of the weight of her story. Emily had fallen asleep against her mother's shoulder, one small hand still wrapped around Sarah's fingers. Sarah looked down at her daughter and smiled, a tired smile, the kind that survives even when everything else doesn't. "She looks like him," William said quietly. Sarah glanced up. "Michael?" William nodded. A genuine smile touched her face. Everyone says that. For a moment, the exhaustion disappeared. Just for a moment, then it returned. William noticed. People carrying grief often looked that way, like they were constantly holding something heavy nobody else could see. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a business card, and placed it gently on the mattress. Sarah looked at it, then at him. "What is this?" "My number." Sarah frowned. William rarely gave anyone his personal number. Most people went through assistants, lawyers, receptionists, layers of distance. But something about this situation felt different. "If anything in this house breaks," he said, "call me." Sarah stared at him. A laugh escaped her lips. She looked around the room, at the cracked walls, the damaged ceiling, the broken floorboards, then back at him. "If anything breaks?" William smiled. "Okay, bad example." For the first time that day, Sarah laughed properly. Even Emily stirred slightly in her sleep. The sound filled the empty house, and somehow made it feel less empty. Then Sarah became serious again. "Why are you doing this?" The question hung between them. William looked around the living room, at the mattress, at the sleeping child, at the house his mother had once loved. Finally he answered honestly, "I don't know." Sarah waited. William looked toward the staircase. "I think," he said slowly, "if my mother were alive and saw this, she'd be angry if I walked away." The room grew quiet. Sarah looked down at the business card again, then carefully slipped it into her pocket. Neither of them realized it, but that small decision would change both of their lives. Outside, the sun finally disappeared below the rooftops. Inside, the old house settled around them. And for the first time since carrying a mattress through the city, Sarah Parker felt something she hadn't felt in a very long time. Not certainty, not security, just a tiny flicker of hope. And sometimes, hope is enough to get through one more night. The next morning, William woke up thinking about the house. That irritated him. He had a board meeting at 9, 3 investor calls before noon, a dinner with potential partners that evening. His schedule was full. His mind should have been on business. Instead, it kept returning to a mattress in an empty living room. By 8:15 a.m., he gave up pretending he wasn't thinking about it. At 8:17, he was driving back to North Hawthorne Avenue. The house looked different in daylight, less mysterious, more honest. The peeling paint was easier to see. The broken gutter along one side of the roof. The weeds pushing through cracks in the walkway. Time had not been kind to the place. William climbed the steps and knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened. Emily stood there. Her face lit up immediately. "Mom, the house guy is back." William laughed. "The house guy?" Sarah appeared from the kitchen, or what used to be the kitchen. She looked embarrassed. "Sorry about that." "It's fine." Emily grinned. "I forgot your name." "William." "I like house guy better." Sarah covered her face. William laughed again. For reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't mind. Not at all. Then he noticed something. The little girl was holding a paintbrush. Blue paint covered her fingers. William looked past her. One section of the living room wall had been painted, only a small section, but it was bright, fresh, alive. What happened here? Emily's smile widened. We started fixing it. William stared. Already? Sarah shrugged. We couldn't afford contractors. Emily proudly held up the paintbrush. So we're doing it ourselves. William looked at the wall, then at the bucket of discount paint sitting nearby, then at the mother and daughter. They had spent their first night in an empty house, and instead of complaining, they had started rebuilding it. Something about that hit him harder than he expected. Most people would have seen a broken house. Sarah and Emily saw a future. William smiled. For the first time since returning to North Hawthorne Avenue, he felt certain of one thing. Walking away was no longer an option. William stepped inside and looked at the freshly painted section of wall. It wasn't perfect. A few streaks were visible. The edges weren't completely straight, but it was bright, and somehow it made the entire room feel different. Emily noticed him staring. We're getting better. William smiled. Who's we? She held up the paintbrush. Me. Sarah laughed from behind her. According to Emily, she's the foreman of the project. The what? The boss. Emily nodded proudly. Exactly. For the first time in a long while, the house sounded happy. William looked around. There was still no furniture, no dining table, no couch, no curtains, just a mattress, 2 bags, and a bucket of paint. Yet somehow it felt more alive than many of the luxury homes he had visited. His eyes drifted toward the kitchen. The refrigerator stood open, empty, not almost empty, empty. Sarah noticed where he was looking and quietly closed the door. The gesture lasted less than a second, but William saw it, and he understood. He remembered his own mother doing the same thing years ago, closing cabinets before visitors noticed how little was inside, straightening things that didn't need straightening, protecting dignity. The room suddenly became very quiet. Emily broke the silence. I'm hungry. Sarah froze, only for a moment, but William noticed. Parents learn to hide many things. Worry isn't one of them. Not completely. I'm making lunch soon, Sarah said. Emily nodded, but the answer sounded familiar. Too familiar. William had heard versions of it throughout his childhood. Lunch soon. Tomorrow. Next week. We'll figure something out. The language of people trying their best. William checked his watch, then looked at Emily. What's your favorite food? The question instantly brightened her face. Pizza. That's easy. With extra cheese. Very specific. Emily nodded seriously. It's important. Sarah laughed despite herself. 20 minutes later, 3 large pizzas sat on the floor of the living room because there was no table, no chairs, and nobody cared. Emily sat cross-legged on the mattress with a slice nearly as big as her face. This is the best day ever. Sarah shook her head. You said that at the zoo. The zoo was second best. William laughed. Watching them eat felt strangely satisfying. Not because of the pizza, because for the first time since he met them, Emily looked like a child instead of a survivor. There was a difference, a huge difference. As lunch continued, William's phone buzzed, then buzzed again, then again. Investor calls, meetings, messages, his assistant asking where he was. He ignored all of them. Sarah noticed. Aren't those important? William glanced at the screen. Probably. Probably? He smiled. They'll survive. Sarah looked at him carefully. Most wealthy people she had met acted as if every minute of their time was priceless. Yet here he was, sitting on the floor of an empty house eating pizza with strangers. It didn't make sense. Then again, neither did most of life. Emily suddenly pointed toward the ceiling. What's that noise? Everyone stopped. A faint dripping sound echoed from upstairs. Drip, drip, drip. William looked up. Sarah looked up. Emily looked up. The house had just made its first repair request. And judging by the sound, it wasn't going to be a cheap one. Drip, drip, drip. The sound echoed through the house. Emily looked up at the ceiling. That doesn't sound good. No, William said. It really doesn't. The three of them climbed the stairs. The steps creaked beneath their weight. Halfway up, William remembered running up these same stairs as a boy, usually because his mother had just called his full name. Back then, the house had felt indestructible. Now it sounded tired. At the top of the stairs, the dripping became louder. Sarah pushed open the door of what would eventually become her bedroom. A dark stain spread across one corner of the ceiling. A plastic bucket sat beneath it. Drip, drip, drip. Emily frowned. Was that bucket already here? William nodded. It was probably left by whoever inspected the property. Sarah sighed. That's not encouraging. William walked closer. The leak wasn't new. The stain had been growing for years. The recent rain had simply made it impossible to ignore. He looked out the window toward the roofline, then reached for his phone. Who are you calling? Sarah asked. A roofer. Sarah immediately shook her head. No. William looked at her. No. We can handle it. William almost argued, then stopped. The look on her face wasn't stubbornness. It was pride, the kind that develops when you spent years surviving without help. I know you can, he said carefully, but water damage doesn't wait. Sarah crossed her arms, and neither do repair bills. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emily raised her hand. Both adults looked at her. I vote for no leaks. William laughed. Sarah tried not to. Failed. The tension broke instantly. A few minutes later, William was downstairs making a phone call. By some miracle, one of his contractors was already working nearby. They could come tomorrow morning. When he hung up, Sarah was standing by the window. You didn't have to do that. William looked at her. I know. Then why did you? The question lingered. William thought about it, then answered honestly. Because 21 years ago, when this house started falling apart, nobody helped my mother. Sarah looked away. The words hit closer than he intended. Outside, the afternoon sun shone through the dusty glass. Inside, the old house was quiet again, except for the leak upstairs. A reminder that some problems couldn't be ignored. But for the first time since Sarah carried a mattress through the city, she wasn't facing those problems alone. And that realization frightened her almost as much as it comforted her. The roofer arrived at 8:03 the next morning. His truck barely fit in the driveway. Within 10 minutes, 2 workers were on the roof. Within 20 minutes, they had bad news. William could tell from their faces before they said a word. The older roofer climbed down the ladder and removed his gloves. The leak isn't the problem. Sarah's stomach tightened. What do you mean? The leak is a symptom. He pointed toward the roof. You got rotted decking underneath. Water's been getting in for years. Sarah looked up, then at William, then back at the roofer. How bad is it? The man hesitated. That was never a good sign. If this had gone another winter, part of the roof probably would have collapsed. Emily, who was standing on the porch eating a cereal bar, froze. Collapsed? The roofer immediately smiled. But it's not going to. Emily relaxed. Okay. Adults often forget how carefully children listen. William didn't. He remembered being that child, listening to conversations he wasn't supposed to understand, trying to measure danger from the expressions on adult faces. The roofer handed William an estimate. William glanced at it, then folded it in half. Sarah noticed. How much? William didn't answer immediately. That told her everything. William, he sighed, more than it should be. How much? When he finally told her, Sarah went silent. The amount was nearly what she earned in 4 months. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Sarah laughed. Not because anything was funny, because sometimes reality became so overwhelming that laughter was easier than panic. Emily looked between them. Is that bad? Sarah forced a smile. A little. The roofer cleared his throat. We can start tomorrow if you want. Tomorrow. The word hung in the air. Sarah looked at the estimate again, then at the house, then at Emily. She already knew the answer. She just didn't know how to say it. We can't afford that. The admission came quietly. The roofer nodded. He had heard those words many times. More times than he could count. He gathered his papers and started toward the truck. Then William stopped him. "Go ahead and schedule it." Sarah turned immediately. "What?" The roofer paused. William repeated himself. "Schedule it." The man nodded and walked away. For a moment, the only sound was a distant lawnmower somewhere down the street. Then Sarah faced William. "You can't do that." "Apparently I can." "I'm serious." "So am I?" Sarah shook her head. "I can't accept that." William looked at the house, at the roof, at the peeling paint, at the place where his mother had spent most of her life. Then he looked back at Sarah. "You're not accepting charity. It feels like charity." "No." He pointed toward the roof. "That's an investment." Sarah frowned. "An investment in what?" William smiled. "Making sure the house doesn't fall on my favorite foreman." Emily looked up instantly. "I'm the favorite?" "By a wide margin." Emily grinned. Sarah tried not to smile. Failed. Again. For the first time in years, something unusual was happening inside that old house. The future was beginning to look bigger than the problems. And none of them knew that an even bigger surprise was only days away. 3 days later, the roof was finished. For the first time in years, rain could fall on the house without finding its way inside. Emily celebrated as if they had won a championship. She ran from room to room laughing. No more buckets. No more drips. No more sealing water. The workers laughed. Sarah laughed. Even William found himself smiling. The house was changing, one repair at a time, one wall at a time, one day at a time. But the biggest transformation wasn't happening to the house. It was happening to the people inside it. That afternoon, William stood on the porch talking with a roofing contractor when a silver sedan pulled up to the curb. A woman stepped out carrying a folder. She checked the address twice before walking toward the house. "Can I help you?" Sarah asked. The woman smiled politely. "I hope so." She opened the folder. "My name is Rebecca Lawson. I'm an attorney." William immediately paid attention. Attorneys rarely showed up unexpectedly with good news. Rebecca looked directly at Sarah. "I'm trying to locate the family of Michael Parker." Sarah froze. The mention of her late husband's name stopped her cold. She hadn't expected to hear his name from a stranger, not after 4 years. "Why?" she asked quietly. Rebecca glanced down at the folder. Several years ago, a lawsuit related to a construction accident that took Michael's life was settled. Sarah stared at her. "What?" The settlement funds were approved, but all correspondence was sent to an outdated address. The porch grew silent. Rebecca continued. "The money was never claimed." Sarah blinked. For a moment she thought she had misunderstood. "What money?" Rebecca mentioned the amount. Sarah's knees nearly gave way. It was more money than she had seen in years. More money than she had imagined having. For a moment, nobody spoke. Emily looked between the adults. "Mom." Sarah sat slowly on the porch steps. Tears filled her eyes. Not because of the amount, because for the first time in years, something connected to Michael had brought hope instead of pain. For years his memory had been attached to loss, to grief, to struggle. Now it was connected to a future. Rebecca handed over the paperwork. "The funds belong to you and Emily." Sarah looked down at the documents. Her hands trembled. The woman who had carried a mattress through the city because she had nowhere else to go was suddenly looking at the possibility of stability, a possibility she had not dared to imagine. Emily sat beside her. "Mom, are we okay now?" Sarah wrapped her arms around her daughter. A tear rolled down her cheek. Then another. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "Yes, sweetheart." She smiled through tears. "I think we're finally going to be okay." William looked toward the house. The same house he had spent 21 years avoiding. The same house that had somehow brought all of them together. And in that moment, he realized something. Success isn't measured by how much money you make. It's measured by how many lives become better. Because you were there. If William had ignored what he saw that afternoon, Sarah and Emily would still have survived. They were strong enough. But because he stopped, their journey became a little easier. And sometimes that's all kindness needs to be. Not solving someone's entire life. Just making the road a little less difficult. Sarah learned another lesson. Never give up, because today's struggle is not always tomorrow's reality. 3 days earlier, she was carrying a mattress down the street. Now she was holding the keys to a future she thought was gone forever. Life can change faster than we imagine. The story of William, Sarah, and Emily reminds us that every person we meet is carrying a burden we cannot see. Be kind, be patient, be generous when you can. You never know whose life may be changed by a simple act of compassion. And if you're going through a difficult season right now, remember this. A chapter is not the entire book. A bad season is not your entire life. Keep moving. Keep believing. Keep showing up. The next page may look completely different from the one you're living today. Thank you for spending this time with us on Super Stories. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs encouragement today. And before you go, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? USA, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, or somewhere else in the world. We love hearing from our Super Stories family around the globe. Until next time, remember, a small act of kindness can change a life, and sometimes it can change your own too.